Welcome to this callas PDF Toolbox webinar. This is one that fits in a series. It's actually a repeat of one that we've done a couple of months ago. We've done a series of using PDF Toolbox for particular market segments, sign and display, commercial print, and then we did one for labels. Since we did the webinar for labels, PDF Toolbox 15 was released, and it happens to be so that in PDF Toolbox 15 there is a bunch of functionality that is very specifically useful for the label market. And so I wanted to take the opportunity to redo this webinar and then give some additional examples using that new functionality. So let's get started here. I'll try to finish up in about an hour. That is my goal. If you've been to these webinars before, you know that that goal is not always kept, but I will do my best. There should be a questions area and a chat area where you can put questions there. I know there are some other people from 4Ps. I can't see the chats or the questions right now, so if there is anything urgent or something about video or audio quality, let me know on Teams, and I will try to keep an eye on that. So let's get started. Very brief introduction. What is PDF Toolbox? It is essentially PDF technology to inspect files, what in our industry typically is referred to as Preflight, and to correct files. And correct is in two different ways. You can think of the inspection part, the Preflight part, and then fixing the problems that come up during Preflight. But correction more and more has to do with making files production ready. And that can be much more. It can go much further than correcting things during Preflight. As a very silly example, well, not silly at all, perhaps. I was just talking before this webinar, talking to someone who mentioned barcodes. And so PDF Toolbox has a complete barcode library that is built in, and that allows you to add all kinds of different barcodes to a file. And that could be used potentially to either tag a file, so it can be scanned in with a barcode reader, a scanner, or it could be used to send a file to a cutting device that then automatically knows which job it's talking about. So nothing to do with quality control per se, but something that is very useful on a PDF file anyway. It comes in a number of different flavors if you want. What I will be using during this webinar is PDF Toolbox Desktop. Of course, I'm not just going to show you presentation. I mainly want to show some examples in PDF Toolbox, and I'm going to use PDF Toolbox Desktop for that. Comes as a standalone application, and I always use the standalone application because it's easy during demos. It doesn't have all of the Acrobat user interface around it. But PDF Toolbox also allows you to automate things, and so I have PDF Toolbox Server, which does so using hot folders. You have PDF Toolbox CLI, which does so on the command line or from scripting environments. And you have a PDF Toolbox SDK, which essentially comes with development libraries that you can link into your own application. And it does so, look at the cute penguin, on Mac, Windows, and Linux, on all of those platforms. The desktop application only exists on Mac and Windows, by the way, not on the Linux environment. So, what do we want to talk about? Well, I selected a number of different topics to talk about. It is really easy to fill an hour with all kinds of functionality that you have in PDF Toolbox. And in order to make this understandable, I tried to combine into 6 main areas. As I said in the beginning, well, it still means that there is a lot more that you can do, and I don't have time to show everything. But let's look at these 6 main areas to begin with. And we'll start by, well, it's almost commonplace right now, and everyone does it, you could say. But let's start with Preflight in there. So PDF Toolbox allows you to preflight a file either completely custom, meaning you can make, of course, your own profiles. You could start from scratch and just add the 5 or 6 small things that you want to check for. But it, of course, also comes with full support for all of the Preflight standards out there. And on the slide, you can see support for PDFX, but you can also see some of the other ISO standards, perhaps not so relevant, at least not all of them in graphic arts, but all of the ISO standards around PDF are fully supported. The Gantour group profiles that build on top of those PDFX standards are also supported, and as I said, you can of course include additional checks and fixes, or you could make something completely custom. And as we go through this webinar, and especially I think near the end of the webinar, you'll see me talk about a number of very label-specific problems and pre-flight checks that you could have for those. So the result of pre-flight is an idea whether the file is good or not good. And that can come in multiple forms. So you can have a pre-flight report that is a PDF file. The pre-flight report is fully customizable. So what I'm showing here are just 2 different manifestations of the same report. I do pre-flight, I decide which layout I want for my pre-flight report, and then it generates that for me. And depending on what type of file, you may want to highlight certain things. Maybe there is something that comes in a different size. Maybe you want to show front and a back. Maybe you want to show separation. All of that in many cases. What you're really interested in is also automatically looking at the results of that pre-flight and then dealing with them completely automatically. And that could be integrated on a website. And I'll show you an example of that in a second. It could be in something like a Focus Switch, where it's in an automation context. PDF Toolbox caters to that by letting you generate a pre-flight report that is an XML file with all of the information from the document that you're checking, but also all of the pre-flight information. How many errors were found? Are really errors or warnings or information on which information is in the XML and can be parsed automatically, or you can generate a JSON file that has the same information in it. And in fact, in PDF Toolbox 15, there are now 2 different types of JSON report. One that is slightly simpler, that's the one that you see here, but the other one really mimics the XML version of the pre-flight report that you saw before. And so it's slightly more complex, but it also has more information in it. But essentially, if you want to run PDF Toolbox automatically, you can also get machine-readable versions of the pre-flight report that let you integrate the results into a website, perhaps, and show errors immediately to the user. You can not only do pre-flight, but you have this concept of variables. And variables allow you to make a link between the data that comes, for example, from a web shop and the actual pre-flight process, as you see here. So if I have a website where I can upload a PDF document and that features a width and a height edit box, so my customers can tell me I want to order a label that is this wide and this high, then I also want to make sure that I can pre-flight that and that I can check that the file that they upload matches the details of that order. And with variables in PDF Toolbox, you can do exactly that. And that's what you see here schematically, but I'm of course not going to only do schematic things. Let's see if we can show how that works. So what you see here is a site that was built by us for one of our customers. And what I have here is a way to, and this is specifically for labels, I can say what type of label I'm planning to send. And so I could say, oh, I'm going to send something that is a circle and it is 30 mil in diameter, and then I can say take a file, upload that to the portal, and I get immediate results. This is only an example, and that is important to realize. So this is a site that uses PDF Toolbox, the command line version of PDF Toolbox in the background. It runs a standard pre-flight process that checks on a number of things. It also generates a preview image also with PDF Toolbox. And so it shows me the preview image, and then it overlays on top of that the cut contour for the dimension that I've entered, but also a safe area, the green, and then the cyan is the bleed area. And so it tells me that in this case, the artwork is incorrectly sized. So that's one of the problems it found. And also that the text or some of the text on this label is too close to the safety area. And of course, that is correct. I entered the wrong dimensions for that particular PDF document. And so my text crosses even over the cut contour, not just the safe area. And as you can see, when I do that, there is even an indication of where that text is on the page. It is overlaid in red. All of the information that is used to highlight the errors, the exact error messages that are shown, and so on, comes out of one of those pre-flight reports. And so the information that I filled in here is passed as variables to PDF Toolbox, which pre-flights it, and then it shows me the errors on top of the artwork. So just to show you one possible way in which PDF Toolbox can be integrated in a web portal, for example. But of course, the actual implementation will be very dependent on the business rules that you have and what exactly you want to accomplish. Okay. Let's say that our file passes pre-flight. One of the next steps that you very often then have to do is impose it in some way. And we're talking about labels, so I'm going to show you something that is relatively simple again, but specific for labels, which is some kind of step and repeat. As you can see, I like showing the product much better than showing the slides in my presentation. I think none of you will actually disagree with that. So I have a label here. It has a cut contour. It has a certain size. And it's actually, I think, a 3-page document in this case. Yes. And so PDF Toolbox allows me to build imposition configurations. And these imposition configurations determine how a file is going to be imposed. And that could be step and repeat in a commercial context or commercial print context. It could be creating a booklet or doing all kinds of other impositions. But given that we're talking about labels here, let me run this And you can see that I can create and step and repeat of this file. And because I had 3 pages on the input, I have 3 pages on output. And in this particular example, the imposition configuration is fixed. So what do I mean with that? Well, I mean that if I look at the action that happens here, it is a step and repeat where I say, I will tell you how many columns and how many rows I want to have. Yeah? PDF Toolbox can be smarter than that, and so I could say, give me, I'll use 2 other files so that you can see the difference and know that I am not cheating. So I have a different configuration here, fill page with labels, where this imposition configuration assumes that I want an A4, a landscape A4, if I'm not mistaken. And when I run it, PDF Toolbox now automatically calculates how many of that label fit on that landscape A4. And so I end up with a total of 28 labels or stickers in this particular example with this particular file. If I take a different file, the number could of course be different because I'm looking at a different file with a different size, and so a different amount may fit on that A4. The reason I wanted to show also this imposition configuration is because it shows that you can build in some dynamic behavior in the imposition. Actually, this imposition configuration uses JavaScript, and so you can do a whole bunch of calculations in there to determine how exactly the files should be put on the larger sheet. As I said, there are many other things that you can use in terms of imposition, but because we're dealing with labels here, I'm going to stick to the example of step and repeat. In my presentation here on the slide, you can also see that there are some marks that were added that was not, well, I had trim marks in the first example, but if you need something like a registration mark or a cutting mark, or whether it's a rectangle or a circle and black or some other color, of course, those things could then be added as well. If you wanted some barcode or maybe a data matrix code along the edge of the page, then of course that can also be done. Yeah, and that really is the power of PDF Toolbox, is that yes, it contains an imposition engine, but the imposition engine is very flexible and it can be combined with all of these other things that PDF Toolbox can do. So next, one of the very common things when you think about labels or talk about label production is that very often things need to be added to the production file. And we have some examples here. And the first thing I want to use as an example is white. Why would you add white? Well, undercolor white, for example, because you're printing on transparent medium. So there are different ways in which this can be done. And I'm just going to show you the 3 different examples. I have them here in my presentation, but it's much nicer. Again, if I can show what that does. So let me take the files. Actually, do I have the one for... Yes, I think so. So I have a first one here that I could look at. And then that will be this one. And I'm going to actually run it because I also want to be able to show you what the result looks like. Let me put that in results. So this is a very simple example. And I've done it slightly wrong so that you can see visually what happens here. You can see that there is a little bit of white appearing here. What I've done is I added a white layer in the background of, actually in the foreground of this file. It could be the background or the foreground. That's a configuration issue. So I've added something that is spot color white. It is shown as a cyan in this particular case, and I made it slightly smaller than the image itself. What PDF Toolbox does when you ask it to do something like this is it uses the built-in shape technology. And I'll talk about that a little bit further in this webinar. It uses shapes, and in this case, I asked it to automatically detect the shape of my artwork, so of this penguin. And then I asked it to choke that shape. And that means make it a little bit smaller, a couple of millimeters smaller. And so what I can do is use this to add an undercolor white. The white that you add in this way is the same actually as the other example I could give you. This file where I could say add white from shapes. That is essentially the same example. And so what gets added, and you see it much better here because it's not transparent, which is also a configuration that you can change, of course. But what you can see is that this adds a shape in a spot color white, but the white is always 100% in all locations. And that may very well be what you need in a particular use case. Sometimes what you want to do is add white that is dependent on the intensity of the ink that you already have. Maybe if you have a lot of other ink, you don't need a lot of undercolor white because it's not going to be a bad thing anyway. But if you have very light areas, you might need more white in the background to keep them visible on that transparent medium. So I can show you two different techniques. I'll actually open both of them now that we are here. So the last one that I'm opening is a PNG, which PDF Toolbox, of course, automatically converts to PDF. So I'll show you the second method here, and this is a method that is based on ink amount. That's exactly what I was describing. So I have areas here that are very dark already, and those will probably not need a lot of ink to make them nicely printable on transparent media. But the areas that are much lighter in this file will require more ink. So if I run that, you can see that that is exactly what you get. So I get a lot of this spot color white in the lighter areas, and I get almost nothing in the areas that are dark already. So a second way to generate that undercolor white that also looks at ink intensities. And just so that you know how that works, this is a profile. And so if I go to the actual fix, this is the fix that does it. It adds a spot color white. The only thing that I want to point out, you don't have to look at all of the details. I know it's probably very small on this screen, but it has an ink to spot mapping curve. So I can create my own curve that says, what is the relationship between the ink that I have, the ink intensity that I have on the page, and the amount of white that needs to be generated at that particular location. So that is the difference with the shape technique. In the shape technique, you can only look at the actual shape of the objects on the document, but the white is always 100%. Here I can look at the amount of ink and then adjust the white that is generated. And the same thing for files that have soft masks, like the one that I have here, where I have a fix-up that specifically adds white according to the soft mask information that is in the document. Yeah. It's a very good example of what you typically see in PDF Toolbox. There is something that you want to do, like adding undercolor white, and then the product gives you 3 or 4 different ways of doing it. And depending on what you need in production, you will need to figure out which of those methods is best in your particular business case. What I often tell people when I give training on PDF Toolbox is it is not necessarily the product itself or the individual things that you can do it that are challenging. It is that there is so much that you can do with this product that you have to figure out what is the best way of doing things and how can I accomplish what I really need in this particular workflow. Bleed is also for labels a very common topic. And of course, you know what bleed is. I have a file that goes up to the trim box or up to the shape of the objects or of the cut contour. But if it doesn't go a little bit bigger than that, I might end up with white along the trim box, for example, because of misregistration during cutting. And so PDF Toolbox has a number of different ways to deal with that. And of course, I have examples for that. So if I look at bleed, and not all of these are label examples, but of course the techniques work just as well with labels. So here I have something that is, I don't know what the size of the document is, but the green line is the trim box that you see in the middle. And you can see that there is nothing in between trim and bleed box. So this file is not going to work very well. What I can do now is I can run my fix-up, and this particular fix-up adds bleed by mirroring. And you can see it very well. So here, again, the green line is the trim box, and you can see that the bleed, the direction of things, of the pattern here, reverses at the trim box. So this is mirroring. Everything that is on the page is mirrored across the four sides of the document and the corners of the document, and it creates bleed that way. That isn't always sufficient, or it's not always the best thing that you can do. I will show you two more examples, and this one is by stretching content. This also has a type of pattern where you would see the mirroring technique very, very clearly. And I'm going to use local stretch in order to avoid that and to get a better result. So if I now zoom in, what you can see is that the content just at the trim box has a little bit of a deformation. And so you can see it here at the corner as well. But the bleed that is generated in this way is much more natural than what you would get from mirroring with this particular file. So when it comes to bleed, know that there are different techniques that you can use. Sometimes the best technique to use is dependent on the type of file you're dealing with. And the last technique that I want to show you is very specific for labels, very common, where I have a label that has a cut contour, obviously. And so I can, and I'll do that in test mode, I can add bleed around the cut contour, and this works by doing pixel repetition. So the last pixel at the cut contour in every location is taken, and that one is replicated to create the bleed that we need for this particular file. For irregular documents, so documents that have irregular shapes, that have cut contours, this pixel repetition technique is the only technique that is available. Well, that's not strictly true. You could also scale the content of the file up to 102% or 103%, whatever is needed to generate enough bleed, and do it that way. Of course, the disadvantage is that you also then scale everything that is inside of the label, which might not be acceptable for the customer in that case. But adding bleed is, of course, possible. And as you saw, there are different ways in which it can be done. Maybe I need to take 2 seconds to mention something else, because I often get that question as I'm giving training as well. And that is, I'm showing all of these things in separation. So I'm showing you how to add white. I'm showing you how to add bleed. We'll talk about cut contours. I talked about pre-flight. I don't want you to get the idea that all of those are manual actions that you need to run one by one. In fact, you can very easily, and I'll just show you how that looks, you can very easily make something that PDF Toolbox calls a process plan, and that process plan can contain a whole range of different actions that follow each other. So you can build a mini workflow if you want for that file to go through. And of course, pre-flight could be done first. And then if the file passes pre-flight, you could look at adding bleeds and adding maybe a cut contour. And so all of these steps can happen one after the other. And some conditional processing can be done so that if a step fails, you go to a specific other step to fix the problem, or you end the process plan because the file will not work in production in that case. So even though I show these things individually, please understand that these things can be automated and can be combined in all kinds of interesting ways. So what happens when the file is production ready? You've done things like pre-flight, you maybe added additional elements to it, maybe you added some barcode to it, maybe a cut contour, whatever you had to do to make the file production ready. And now you have a production ready file and you want to send it to the customer so that it can be approved. Well, PDF Toolbox also has a technology that, and it's typically referred to as place content or PDF chip because it also is a separate product next to PDF Toolbox. But PDF Toolbox has technology to, I call it decorating a PDF file. And decorating a PDF file means I start from a very simple file and then I add things. Things like a barcode that is already part of this place content decoration of that you have in PDF Toolbox. But it's not just adding individual things. You can really go to town with this and create full proof pages, or maybe you want to create the kind of printed order sheet that goes through production as a physical job sheet. Or maybe there is a delivery sheet that you need to do that has some barcodes, but where you also want a preview of the file on it. All of these things can be created with PDF Toolbox. And I'll show you two examples just so that you have an idea of how flexible that is. It's actually twice the same file, but I have two different process plans here, and each of these process plans is created to make one type of proof sheet. Both of them are slightly modified from the production version, but they both come from real production workflows for customers who used to do this by hand. So let me run the first one and we'll put it in our results folder again. And then what you can see is that it ruined my file in the background. You'll see that that gets corrected once it gets through the whole process plan. Don't worry about that. But it shows me this dialog box, and in that dialog box I have variables. That's what this is. And in this case, because I'm using PDF Toolbox Desktop, the variables are, well, I'm presented with this dialog and I can change them. So I could say, no, my quantity is 777. And maybe there is some other stuff that I want to change here. And then those variables are fed into the process plan and will be used in the process plan. Of course, if you're not using PDF Toolbox Desktop, but you're using one of the automated versions of PDF Toolbox, then these variables can be fed from somewhere else. Remember that website that I showed where we did pre-flight for labels? Well, the variables could come from that kind of website. Someone places an order and all of the order information is then passed to PDF Toolbox. So what happens when I run this? Well, it's going to go through a bunch of steps, and this is what you end up with. I have a preview of the file. This doesn't look very good. I could actually clip this to the cut contour and then delete all of the stuff outside of the cut contour. That would probably make it even nicer for the customer. But so I have this preview that is added in a particular location of my A4 sheet, and then all of the variables that were passed in are added to the document. I have my quantity here, and as you can see, the quantity says 777. Yeah? So all of the variables there end up on here, but some things are calculated by PDF Toolbox by itself. For example, the preview that you can see here is scaled down to 87% of the original. That is something that PDF Toolbox calculated. The colors that you see here, the color patches, are calculated by PDF Toolbox. PDF Toolbox has looked at this document, it has figured out which colors are used, and it added color patches with the correct color for all of those spot colors in the document. And then one of the pieces of a variable that were passed, one of the pieces of information that was passed is this rewind. So a winding method, in this case, rewind 1. Based on that, my process plan added the correct image so that the customer understands how the label is going to be delivered on the roll. Of course, this is just an example, and that's why I wanted to run both of these so that you really believe me when I say that this is completely dynamic and that we can modify the template that is used, and because we modify the template, the result is going to be different. So variables again, but you can see that the variables are actually very different in this case. And I will do the same and change the quantity, and the quantity ends up here as well. So now I have the same file. In both cases, I run a process plan, but I get something that looks completely different. Of course, some of the elements come back. I have spot color patches here. I have all of these variables coming in. I have an indication of what type of roll and how the label is going to be printed on the roll, but the presentation is completely different. Yeah. This is the place content engine that you have in PDF Toolbox. It allows you to decorate PDF documents, and that can be very simple. Like I said, you could add a barcode or a piece of text, maybe an order ID or something simple like that. But it can go as far as adding very complex information to make this type of complex document derived from the production version of a PDF document. So there we go. Let's see, I believe, see if I'm right. I was right. We have one more topic to cover. So timing-wise, I might actually do well this time. So one more topic to cover, and that is die lines or cut contours, or call it whatever you want to call it. Everyone has their own name for it, depending on the country and the workflow and whatever. So there is technology, and I'm going to start with the obvious, and I already talked about it a little bit. There is technology in PDF Toolbox that is called Create and Apply shapes. This case, look at the blue rectangle that you have across the slide now. So it could create a shape So I should be back here. So I don't know what happens with this webinar thing, but that's not very good. So let me go back to just the example that I was talking about. So what I wanted to talk about here is one of the other things that you can do with PDF Toolbox 15. And the example that I was starting to look at was I have a cut contour here that is cyan. And on there, I have two green rectangles that are placed there as well. And so what I want to do is I want to cut this, but I don't want to cut it all the way through. In fact, I want to make sure that where you have the green rectangles, it does not cut, so that the material on the inside is still somewhat connected to the outside. So the way to do that is there is a new fix-up in PDF Toolbox 15. What it did was it detected the green objects, removed those, but also cut the die line object where those green objects existed. And so the more of these green objects I would have had in my die line, the more cuts I would have created as well. So this is a way to take a die line that is complete and then cut it up in different places. And then let me finish actually with a last example from PDF Toolbox 15, and I need another example file here, this one, and for this one I have a cut contour and I have a bleed area, and I'm going to use and I'm going to run this one and put that in results. And what that does is it's one of the place content fix-ups. So the fix-ups that, if you remember, can decorate the PDF document. And this one allows you to specify a vector element. And so I specified the vector element for the cut contour and the vector element for the bleed. And it adds text to that vector element. And so I asked for 4 repetitions of the word cut contour, and PDF Toolbox added those around and evenly distributed around the cut contour. And then I asked for 2 repetitions of the word varnish, and PDF Toolbox added those around the cut contour. Okay. And so I'll just very quickly show you that this is indeed a new fix-up. It is called Place Text on Path. And there is just a whole bunch of information that you fill in, including the name of the layer that you want to use, that you want to put the text on, but specifically what the spot color is that you want to add things with, and what the objects are that you want to look for. So here I'm looking for the objects that form the cut shape, and I'm doing that by looking for objects with a particular spot color name, and then everything else is used to decide what font is going to be used, what size of characters is going to be used, and so on. And then how many repetitions I want, how far away it has to be from the line, and so on. Yeah. So that is one of the last examples that I wanted to show in here. And that also puts me at 5 o'clock. So that is